Hello there, everyone. Great to have you with us. My name is David Garrido. I'm a presenter for Sky Sports, and I am the event host and MC for World Football Summit. It's great to have your company for this latest edition of WFS Talks. We're diving deep into a specific topic concerning the football industry. And again, whilst the pandemic keeps us from physically being in one another's company, sadly, at a WFS event, well, this is the next best thing. And today's topic is the football transfer market post-COVID, brought to you in partnership with Player Lens. More on them in just a moment. But let me just start by taking you back just over 10 years. And it was the day before, literally the eve of me joining Sky Sports as a presenter. On the 31st of January, 2011, Fernando Torres moved from Liverpool to Chelsea for £50 million. Andy Carroll switched Newcastle for Liverpool for £35 million. I'm not entirely sure what that is in the currency wherever you are watching this webinar, but let's just say it was a lot of money, and perhaps I'm not sure that either of those moves truly worked out. However, fast forward to 2021, and the activity on the final day of the transfer window was very different. Liverpool brought in a couple of relatively unknown centre-backs, one on loan. Arsenal let a couple of their younger players go elsewhere for the rest of the season. West Brom did a bit of business, but they've got a new manager and they're fighting relegation from the Premier League. So all in all, relatively quiet as far as the window is concerned, and on the final day as well. Add to that the impact of COVID-19. Budgets have been hit. There are new regulations that have been put in place in terms of the financial sustainability of football clubs. And that's led to new recruitment strategies. Clubs have to get smart and get creative to try and find that value. But one of the silver linings is that the technological progress has accelerated. Digital tools are emerging that can help clubs, players and agents. And one of these is Player Lens. They're known as the LinkedIn of the football industry. So they connect those three entities, if you like, in a secure digital space. And at the last count, I'm sure that Jose Ramon, who's one of our speakers, can update us on the numbers. 600 odd professional clubs from 50 countries were registered on the platform, and roughly 100 agents have signed up too. And of course, on top of that, we have new approaches and outlooks, which emanate from different club owners from different countries. As we discussed in one of our sessions at the latest WFS Live event in November, we're seeing an increasing number of North American investors in France and Italy in particular, as well as some of the biggest clubs historically in English football, and they are prominent too in selected other European leagues. There are plenty more angles and factors to be discussed in the next hour or so, and we'll do so in the company of the following. I've mentioned him already, Jose Ramon Capdevila, who is the Managing Director of Player Lens, Gregory Carey, Managing Director of Goldman Sachs, Jordan Gardner, Chairman of the Board and co-owner at FC Helsingør. We hope to have with us as well Dan Singer, Leader of Global Sports and Gaming Practice at McKinsey & Company. Dan currently just having a few little technical issues joining this live storm platform, but we hope to play him in as soon as we can. And our moderator for today is Ebru Köksal, Senior Advisor at J. Stern and Co. It's great to have all of you with us. Before I hand over to you, Ebru, just also worth saying we really do value your input, the audience, into today's session. So for those of you not acquainted with the Livestorm platform, it's really quite simple. On the right of your screen, you see 4 tabs, chat, questions, polls, and people. Chat does exactly what it says on the tin. Please put your questions for today's speakers in the questions tab. We'll try to reflect those if we have time. The polls are for you to vote on right now, and people is who is in the room. So go and have a little sniff around and see who else is attending the same webinar. Our polls are live right now, so get involved. They're on the subject of player exchanges between confederations, on whether salary caps could be implemented by leagues, and whether Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency could be used commonly by clubs in the payment of transfer fees. Great questions, great topics. So get involved and do enjoy the session. Ebru, lovely to see you again. Over to you.
Thank you very much, David, for such a dynamic introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen who joined us today. I'm a person of numbers, so allow me to just set the scene before our amazing speakers start giving us their views on the transfer market. 2020, needless to say, was a very difficult year for the whole world, but for football industry as well. Revenues of European football clubs were down about 12–13%. Player market values dropped about 20 to 30%. Club valuations were down about 25–30% again. And if we look at the transfer market and the FIFA reports, we saw an increased, tremendous growth in the last decade. For the first time in 2020, the gross fees of transfers dropped to pre-2017 levels to 4.9 billion And this is about a quarter down compared to 2019's record-breaking 6.6 billion. And the volume of transfers, number of transactions were also down 5%. In case those of you who are wondering what was happening on the women's game for players, yes, for the moment, obviously the volume is much, much lower than the men's game. But actually 2020, there was a very huge growth with almost doubling of the transfer values from 0.7 million to 1.2 million in 2020. January transfer window, needless to say, was again significantly down. Number of transactions, 36% less, and the value of the transfers down 49%, from 1.2 billion down to 0.6. Women's international transfers maintained their momentum in January and saw an increase of about 60%. So against this background, the balance of power that is traditionally mostly with the selling clubs seems to be moving towards the buying club as the economic situation and access to financing has become an important part of the puzzle. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Greg to talk a little bit about the football club sustainability and the finance environment, the post-pandemic period.
Thank you, Ibra. It's always great to be with you. You know, it's a very challenging time in the world, whether you're an airline, a hotel, you know, or a sporting owner. COVID has greatly affected, and you're seeing the results in Europe with no fans in the seats, lack of sale of merchandise, you know, people staying home. It's interesting. The U.S. market is actually seeing greater losses than Europe because they derive more of their revenue from their stadium and arenas than Europe does. But that being said, Europe, most of the clubs are fully levered. Most of the clubs have factored next year's receivables or done debt financing. The lack of oversight, even though you have financial fair play, the lack of oversight of each one of the domestic leagues, UEFA, and UEFA has put a problem. The release valve for the clubs has always been the transfer market. Well, when the big clubs, outside of a few that have wealthy owners and can put money in up top, then everybody's a seller in today's market. Nobody's a buyer, and they can't get the price they are looking for. And that release valve is a problem, and it'll come back, but it's going to take a while to come back. The second issue is the issue of financial fair play. These losses, for example, certain clubs have 100 million of loss or 150 million of loss. They can't fix that problem tomorrow. So it's my view that this financial fair play is going to have to be toothless for a significant period of time as these clubs ramp up. So you're going to see some type of, you know, waiver that we have in the U.S. We're waiving all the debt. The debt rules have all been loosened in all of the leagues in the U.S. with waivers. That's going to happen with financial fair play, because there's no way clubs can make money. There's no one to sell the expensive players to. They have contractual obligations. You know, it's fixed expenses and lower revenues. So it's almost like this U-shaped recovery we're talking about from COVID in the economies. It's also going to be a U-shaped recovery. So things are not going to be back to normal next year. It's going to take 2 to 3 years for the transfer window to roll up, but it's going to take 5+ years to get the financial footing back on. Now, the good thing about what's going on in the world right now is liquidity in the marketplace. And Jordan and I were just talking about how many U.S. investors have come into Denmark. There's so much liquidity, the issuance of specs, the hedge funds, $59 billion got added to the equity markets last week alone. So you're seeing highs in stock markets in the U.S. People like sports. So you have this huge liquidity on the sidelines, but they don't know yet where to jump in, because the problem with a lot of these clubs, people don't realize until they get in, they're animals. They eat. They have to be fed. They eat. They drink. and they cost money, and they are temperamental as well, the fan base as well as the players. So it's pardon my French, it's a shit show right now, but it's going to be fine. This is not going to go away, but it's going to take a lot longer than people think. It's not going to snap back tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great overview. And welcome, Dan, in the meantime. Great to see you.
Thank you.
I will, if you're ready, ask you your views on the financial sustainability and how do you see the situation post-COVID for football?
Right. So in our view, the COVID accelerated some secular trends that were there already, one of which is the squeeze on the profitability of pay TV distributors and pay TV networks. At the highest level, the rights of premium sports, including football in Europe, have been growing anywhere from 5 to 10%, depending on the market. And for another few years, certainly through 2024, 2025, it looks like that's going to continue to be the case based on the most recent major contract sign. But there's hardly any growth in pay TV networks, particularly in markets that have really big pay TV ecosystems like the UK and Italy. So with probably zero growth, 1%, 2%, maybe minus 2%, depending on the network, it's hard to see where media rights increases are going to come from TV. Now, long term, we'd be pretty bullish about over the top, both on a subscription basis and ad supported, although for football, it should be subscription primarily. But it's going to take quite a long time to build up the direct to consumer marketing capabilities, and even just to build the habit among fans for paying 10 euros a month, 15 euros a month, 25 euros a month, depending on the package. So it's I don't see a lot of relief from media. And then on the live side on Gate, it's another one of these prediction games where there's a scenario in which people come roaring back to stadia because we've been shut down for so long, that there's a lot of store demand. Maybe we can get some price increases on average through, but there's a scenario in which it takes a long time for folks to get back in the habit of paying for tickets, attending live events. If you look at the longer term trends, live attendance is very slowly declining in most markets. I don't really expect that to change because the reasons that attendance is declining is competition from all kinds of digital media, social media, and also just habits. Young people spend their time a little differently. This is not the panel for that. But with that, I think it just brings to the surface, and we're seeing this in many leagues and clubs around the world, tensions that were there already, and I think will force some structural decisions that aren't easy to make or implement. Yeah.
That's a great overview as well. And Jordan, as the club side, really sitting every day, trying to cope with this situation, what is your view? How has the pandemic affected the clubs really inside?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Dan and Greg in particular said. It's definitely a rough time to be on the club side. There's no doubt about it. I think what's interesting is you had a lot of clubs over I'd say the first 6 to 8 months of the pandemic kind of realizing, okay, we're going to budget for this. We understand this is a pretty unprecedented situation. We're going to have more liquidity. And then a lot of clubs kind of had this approach that I talked to and said by last summer, okay, everything's going to be back to normal, taking this kind of ultra optimistic view. And now another 6 months later, fast forward, clubs are really, really in poor financial shape, not understanding how long this has gone on for. So, the question I get asked a lot is the pandemic going to change the way these clubs behave? Are they going to be run more efficiently? Are they going to make better sound decisions because they've had to because of the pandemic? And in general, my answer is no. I think clubs are making decisions out of self-interest, out of self-preservation right now. And once over a period of time, some of the media rights come back and the fans obviously come back to the games, I think we'll probably see things go back to the way they were before, which is obviously disappointing. But it's a situation that everyone's in. Everyone's doing the best they can. Some leagues are getting hit more than others. I mean, you see what's happening in France with their media rights situation, which is a mess. Smaller clubs like ours in Denmark, we're doing the best we possibly can. But I mean, everything from sponsorship to tickets it's just really problematic right now.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation, and I share your view and wonder whether there will be permanent changes in club owner and management behaviors, because there's a lot of short-sightedness as well, not much long-term planning, unfortunately, because many of the revenues are dependent on success. So that's the difficulty of our beloved industry, unfortunately. On top of everything, yes, Greg.
One of the things that Dan, and we're spending a lot of time, I lend a lot of money on stadium and arenas, and obviously there are no monies. But what we're seeing is in the stadium and arenas, the bookings for the fourth quarter for acts, because they haven't made any money. I use a statement, what happened after the pandemic of 1918? And the answer was the roaring 20s. And that was even during the Volstead Act. We're actually thinking about almost like a pop and then back to a levelization. So we do think once safety is there, we think there's going to be a pop for a couple of years and then back to the trends that Dan is talking about, because it's the craving of what is going on. New York is just opening up this week. I mean, I wouldn't go to a stadium right now, and I got my vaccine this morning. But in 6 months, this is people, when the comfort comes back, you're going to see a pop and then a levelization, I think. Is what we think is going to happen. But the pain is much, getting back to Jordan's point, the pain, I'm thinking it's next Christmas. So are the leagues going to get delayed? Is basketball and hockey in the US going to get delayed till December? Is football, I think the open air stadiums are a little better. So it's play it by ear. Things are better this week, but who knows what the South African strain is going to do with the vaccine? Who knows? And the problem is nobody was financially set up to handle this in the first place. It was no different than, not to talk about politics, the US was not in condition. Our deficits were the largest ever before the pandemic hit. So the government was not fully ready to put money into to stimulate the economy.
There is not, sorry.
Just one bright side is the US is diligently legalizing sports betting, and we're already up to 22 states with more to come. And that's going to create from under $1 billion revenue market to about 8 billion in 2025. And that's important in general, but it's also important because it can drive fandom. We see that it's hard to get exact numbers on this, but someone who bets on sports consumes about twice as much sports as someone who's just a fan who doesn't. So there is at least some tailwind from that. The other thing, and this is not answerable, but what do you reckon the odds are this happens again? Is it 0.1%? Is it 1%? Is it 2%? Because there might be some future in which we have to adapt the way we run sports to a recurrence. I don't really think I don't know the answer to that, but it's probably not zero. So I share Greg's bullishness in the near term and even mid and long term, but we can't just continue operating the business the way we always have, because conditions have changed permanently, not just because of some risk of pandemic, but also because of fan behavior.
Yeah. You're right. And on top of all this, there is also talks of new tournament structures and bigger events, big mega events. So, Greg, we were chatting about it before our guest came in. What is your view on this new, for example, revamped Champions League structure or the possibility of a Super League? How is that going to impact the already existing financial cliff between the big clubs and the smaller countries and smaller clubs?
As Dan mentioned, the domestic markets, with pay-per-view, it's going to start to flatten out. It's still growing, but we're seeing that plateauing. The issue is people want to see the bigger clubs play each other, and the question is it a zero-sum game, or is it going to be the old Reagan's budget director, the trickle-down economics, where everything is going to get pulled, Stockman. Everything is going to get pulled up and everyone will get, because there'll be more. It's a very interesting thing. The strong are always going to get stronger here. When there's situations like this, they'll take advantage of it. They'll buy people. People are going to get desperate at the lower levels. They'll pick up people for a song because they'll have more access to capital, whether it's via equity or debt, than the lower clubs. Top 5 clubs in each one of the domestic leagues really still have the ability to do anything they want. I think headlines are great, but even clubs, Barcelona, they're the top revenue clubs in the world. They're going to be fine. They'll have access to making sure everything is fine. It's the lower clubs that are just getting squeezed. They're paying 10+% for loans, and that it adds up. So the answer is, the hope is that this trickle down effect, that everything gets pulled up together. The question is, it is a zero-sum game, and is it going to take away from the domestic leagues?
Yeah.
And those type of performance. How much can you grow in an area that's kind of flattening? But the strong are going to get stronger, I think.
Yeah. Jose Ramon, actually, I want to pull you into the discussion, and referring back to a statement that Greg just made about the transfer market being the pressure valve for clubs, for quick, cash, for sale of players. Do you think this new normal is pushing us towards different recruitment strategies for players?
Yep. So first of all, thank you, Ebru. Thank you, all of you, to staying here on the round table. It's a pleasure. So here, I think that there are just a couple of insights that very quickly I would like to share with you to support what Greg, Dan, and Jordan were saying before regarding the club revenues. So very quickly, we were analyzing the famous top 10 club ranking from Deloitte on what happened on the last 3 seasons. So as we can see, a significant growth in terms of club revenues for the season 1920 on double-digit growth rates, where essentially when I was analyzing these for the last 6-7 years, for me it was very difficult to find double-digit growth rates. Even clubs as Real Madrid, Barcelona, Man United, Bayern Munich. If we analyze the global trend for the last 10 years, we can see that the CAGR, the compound annual growth rate, we are talking about something ranges between 4 to 5%. However, I think that here there was such a huge exception between the year 1920. And however, here you have the impact for the COVID, just taking a look at what happened on the last summer transfer window. No? So here you just have an example. And the reason about the new strategies, recruiting strategies, here you have some figures on what happened in each of the top 5 European leagues, no? In terms of what is the money that was spent in transfers. So for the 1920, we are talking on around 6 billion euros, roughly. And for the 2021, the last transfer window, the impact just cut the amount in more than 50% on the total spend for the previous year. No, on the money received, I think that this is very important for clubs in terms of cash and how the clubs can fund their necessities for cash to increase their cash flow needs. And here we just have that only 2 billion were received from transfers or loan fees. No, on the last transfer window. No. So from our point of view, is that what we have been experiencing here is that the clubs, they are urgently looking for new formulas on how to recruit players. They need help in terms of cash flows because none of them, I think that they are in a position to take big risks to guarantee their cash flows liquidity. And on the other side as well, Ebru, I think that they are not spending too much money on the transfer fees. No, for what we could experience during the summer transfer window this year, it was that most of the clubs were in a position that the first thing that they were asking is, okay, we are looking for free players. We need free players. We are not in a position to spend any money. Otherwise, please bring free loans, players on loan. So the clubs were struggling, no? And I think that also here what plays a very important role, for example, we were aware, for example, in Spain through La Liga, we have the financial fair play. So I think the clubs have they are very tracked on what they are spending, what they are allowed to spend, aiming to guarantee, as Greg was saying before, no, this long-term sustainability of soccer in this industry, no? So on that position, we consider that they need to reinvent, and I think that it's also an opportunity for new players to get some yields, like through funding the clubs, providing new formulas as investors, as equity owners, and also at the same time, I think that the clubs, they need to, it's an opportunity, this situation, to professionalize all the clubs. No, they need to really to look for additional sources of revenue. I think that this is one of the reasons why everybody's concerned on the new European competitions, aiming to increase the TV rights volume to be distributed between all the clubs. And right here, maybe it's also an opportunity to consider, as Dan was saying as well, through the betting industry and through other potential investments. I think that the clubs have the chance now to look for this professionalization and really look for additional sources of income to avoid these threats that the market is there.
Yeah. Yeah. Jordan, how does this sound to you? Have you been resorting to some of these different alternatives?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a recruitment perspective in the player transfer market, everything has changed. I mean, obviously, then you throw Brexit into the situation. That's changed the way people look at things. I think a lot of clubs, at least the more sophisticated clubs, are looking a little bit more internally and saying, okay, maybe instead of going to a new market that looks exciting and sexy, let's do really good at domestic player recruitment, right? And I think that's, for instance, what some clubs in the UK are going to have to do now with the Brexit rules and requirements. I mean, there's just not as much money to spend in the transfer market. Lots of clubs are looking for players on free transfers. They're having to be more sophisticated. They're having to use platforms like Player Lens, and they're having to really double down on things like data analytics. I think it's forcing a level of sophistication that maybe clubs are kind of, very old school. I can't tell you how many times we get told that this is the way things have been done at this football club for 25 years. And it's like, well, I'm here in San Francisco. Like, that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear us like doing things differently and more efficiently. And of course, we're going to make mistakes, and you're not going to hit on every player in the transfer market. But like, let's do player recruitment and do it really well. So I think it's changing. Not every club's doing it 100% great, but it's doing better.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan, you sent me a very interesting study yesterday that you have done. Can you walk us through a little bit? Because on one hand, of course, it's very important to have the cash flow relief through sale of players, but there's also a significant value addition possibility if you are making the right investment and the right strategy.
Right. So we did a study for the 5 years, 2014 through 2019, of the top 69 football clubs. And what we were looking at was what we call value creation. And the way we calculate team value is the transfer value, actual or theoretical, of every player on every team at the end of the summer transfer period. What we were looking for was the delta. And there's essentially two ways you can create value. One, you can spend cash to acquire players who have more market value. And then the other is you can develop the players in three ways. You can literally develop players through coaching, training, injury prevention, good team management. You can integrate youth players into the senior club, or you can be great at trading, which is, it's simple to describe as buy low, sell high. And what we were trying to see was who was creating the most value, how are they doing it? What we found in the study was, first of all, value creation in this sense through developing players was twice as much as the value created through just investing euros in new players. And within value management or value creation, development of players under contract was about half of the value creation overall. Integration of youth players was 30%, and trading excellence, trading skills was about 20%. It's not to say that trading is not important. It's just a very competitive market, and it's not easy to have an edge on everyone else in trading. The other thing that we saw was there's an amazing difference across the major clubs in terms of their effectiveness overall, but also where they were most effective. For example, Man City, we found that 85% of their value creation was from investing in player acquisitions, literally investing more pounds. 85% of Liverpool's value was from talent management. In other words, the three levers that we described. There's some clubs that were really excellent in one or the other. For example, Olympique Lyonnais was really outstanding at player development and developed most of its value that way, whereas Ajax is one of the clubs that developed the most from youth players. So I think that actually provides a bit of context for the importance, just the financial importance, not to mention there's an extremely high as an R squared of about 0.6 between the value of your players using this measurement and share of points won in the domestic league, so winning on the pitch. It shouldn't surprise anyone that more valuable players are more likely to win, particularly in football. But that it gives context for the value and importance of trading in the context of also developing players and growing homegrown players, as I think Jordan was mentioning.
Yeah. Well, I was quite fascinated with this study, and I will ask Greg now to tell us a little bit about what are the possibilities of financing for player acquisitions and infrastructure investments against this background, of course.
You know, it's interesting, again, on the infrastructure side, clubs like Barcelona or an AC or Inter Milan, they realize that the gate is getting back to Dan's point, where media is going to be flat. Where else can you make money? And it's going to have to be at stadium or ancillary developments around the stadium, which is a lot of what the US people are doing. So whereas you're going to see a temporary pause and getting back to Dan's point, the financing structures that we'll build in, we're going to probably build in pandemic reserves or liquidity reserves. Just like in the US, we have strike reserves, for deals. And we've already put that into place. But I do think you're going to see a resurgence of that type of, the bigger clubs are going to need to invest in capital because there's the return on that capital, and they need making an extra 20 or 50 or 100 million euros is going to be game changers for them. Again, it's changing habits. It's charging people more. It's providing a better fan experience, but people will pay for that. It's been proven. Spurs ultimately is going to be fine. They're just living through the pandemic. That having a comfortable, nice, safe place to go where you have amenities is a proven model, and it will continue. But it's probably only the larger clubs that are going to be able to do it. So the strong will continue to get stronger. Providing money in the transfer window for players. I mean, again, it all is going to come back down to how much leverage does the club already have? There's only the interesting thing about debt is it's nice, but it has to be ultimately paid. There has to be a reasonable expectation to be paid when due. So like a drug, and you've seen the drug overdoses. And so you're going to see a resettling of things. You're going to see some long-term capital be put to play because you can't repay it tomorrow. But you're always going to get this evolution of this business. It's not going anywhere. It's going to come back and grow. It's all going to be about how much money you have. Is there going to be some stability and overspending? But I do think you're going to see is a delay, but you're going to see there's plenty of money out there, and people are going to feel comfortable that, hey, it was fine 2 years ago. It's going to be fine again. And this is, we're going through a 100-year flood. And guess what? Most of the boats are still floating.
Greg, sorry, Greg, I had a really quick question for you. When we talk about debt financing, I'm really curious your take on some of these high interest loans that clubs are taking out, the MSD Capitals of the world. Like, what's your take on that? They're putting up, future parachute payments as collateral. They're putting up real estate assets as collateral. I'm curious your thoughts. Sorry to jump in.
It's a very, we created the whole Mediaco structure for Inter Milan and Roma, in the Italian market where you have Mediaco, and you basically have to build up reserves. You stop money being distributed, if they're on the verge of getting relegated. It's not directly a pledge of the parachute payment, but it's a dangerous issue as you start to think about it. A company like Goldman Sachs, we're not going to take over a club, so the tool of having a pledge of stock, we're just not going to politically take over a club and own a club because we called the debt in. So we look at revenue streams that are purely, the revenue streams that are reliable to be done. Those are fail safes to do. And again, you're going to have to capture things, if monies are short. But a thing like that, you steal the parachute payment, all of a sudden you're down in the UK, you're down in the Champions Division, and guess what? You have no money to pay your players, and you're down to the second division. So it's in finance, you have to look at revenues that are going to show up. Parachute payments are one of those. And the question is, that deals with relegation. relegation is not going away. It's not coming to the U.S. market, but it's not going away in Europe. And it's expensive. You talk about a huge burn, and the question is, can someone change by getting that loan, put them up to get to the first division? So it's a lot of burn, and it's not a great situation. But there's so much money like that out there right now, and for a lot of these clubs, it's the only money that's available, rather than writing a check.
Yeah. Jordan, what has it been like for you? I mean, did you write a check? Did you access financing in Denmark or in the European market?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately for us, we're a small club, so we can just cut a check because we're not talking huge sums of money. But obviously, to my question, seeing bigger clubs taking out kind of distressing and alarming type loans to kind of bridge the gap, it can be problematic. So I think that's one of the advantages of being at a medium to smaller size club is you're a little bit more nimble. When we look at lost revenue, we're not talking 50, 100 million pounds. We're talking a couple million pounds. And yes, that's of course a significant amount of money. But for us, what we're kind of doing, it almost fits in a little bit to our bigger model. And I was telling Greg earlier a little bit of like, well, why would you buy a small club in Scandinavia? And for us, it's like, if we can run a small club in Scandinavia well and efficiently and go through extenuating circumstances like a massive global pandemic and get out on the other side, we can do that at a club in La Liga or in the EPL and feel comfortable with that. And so taking that kind of organic approach, I think has helped us. Of course, if we were at a huge club right now, it'd be much more painful. But for now, it works for us. And it's for me more looking at how are bigger clubs reacting to the current climate. Some I think are doing better than others. And there's some kind of things I see and I'm just like, like if you can't, we talk a little bit. I mean, I don't know how familiar, Greg, you are with the Burnley deal. And like, it's been reported they only put down, I think, 15 million pounds on a 200 million pound deal. And you just look at that, at least from my perspective, I'm like, wow, there's gonna be a lot of American groups interested in buying English Premier League clubs if they can figure out a way only to put 15 million pounds down.
Yeah, but just on that point, you go back to the Aston Villa case. Randy could have sold that club for 155 million euros. He pushed for more, didn't get it. They got relegated. The guy paid 85 million to buy it. He went bankrupt. And then the next group came in. So again, getting back to my other point, these are animals that eat and drink and sleep, and you got to provide for them. And everyone thinks, and this is the great thing about the world and commerce, is everyone thinks they can do a better job to run things. And as long as you have people like that, you're going to have business and someone else buying. So, but yet you're going to see a lot of people picking deals up for the debt.
Yeah. Well, Jose Ramon, your wonderful digital platform, Player Lens, how can that help solve some of these issues in the post-pandemic period?
Yep. So, Andrew, just let me just share the thought on the financing that we were seeing through the clubs in the platform, and what we were thinking, because in some cases we were able and capable to explore potential financing formulas for different clubs, for leagues where they were struggling. So regarding the we are talking about the new competitions, as I said before, talking about how to increase the pie, on the TV rights money. But however, here I think that this is also an opportunity for all the clubs to see how they can maximize the revenues on their assets, or how they can increase their assets. So as Dan was saying before, I think that there has been an increasing development on academies. So local team players are actually an investment for the clubs, a real investment. They are, most of them, really focused on the B teams and the importance of these assets, because most of them, we have seen like around 4 to 6 players that have been promoted into the first teams this year. So it's also an opportunity for young talent to stay there, that maybe in other cases they wouldn't have that opportunity today. And on the other side, I think it's also an opportunity to explore for different clubs how they can monetize as well. When we talk about image rights, when we talk about the sponsorship rights, and also how they can leverage the clubs on these main assets that they also have as part of their balance sheet, and see whether, as Greg was saying, that there is a lot of liquidity in the stock market. It's plenty of hedge funds out there looking to see what they can do in sports. Some of them are still assessing clubs for some takeovers. So I think that it's also an opportunity for all of them, no? And through player lens, what we are just aiming here, I think that, well, when we built the platform, the reason behind was not, we were not thinking on this potential pandemic, no? But before that, as the company founder said, it's like before on the trading market, Bloomberg was not existing some years ago. So we are aiming to become the global connectivity platform. We aim to disrupt the football transfer market in a way that all the football agents are represented, that everybody can maximize the value that they are offering into the market. We aim to generate this global connectivity in a way that where we consider that the data, the main data, there are many companies offering this kind of player data. We are not a company data. We are like that kind of marketplace. So we think that the player data at some point will become a commodity. So the cost on a transaction, I think at some point they are decreasing accordingly to what FIFA is pretending to do on reducing the commissions, on controlling what the agents are allowed to do. So here we just expect that we can provide the value to all the clubs. Even now, we have been realizing on the last transfer window, we were seeing, for example, many European players that were considering moving to play in South America, because even South America, there are some leagues that can still pay some higher salaries than in Europe. So it's something that maybe in the past it was something that was not considered, or even going to Asia. I think that now the Spanish players are pretty open to these opportunities, where they are seeing that they can really get paid much better on what they are getting here in Spain, in Portugal, and this is something that we are capable to do, and this is our priority here, and provide the global value into the transfer market industry and football in general.
Great. Well, there are a lot of questions, so I will start reading a few of them. Ben is asking, with the loss of attendance revenue hitting clubs across the board with losses of 20 to 40%, do you think this summer's transfer market will be down a lot in terms of transfer fees, or will clubs be buying less with an aim to balance the books? Jose Ramon, do you want to make an estimate on that?
Please. Is it the first question? Can you repeat again?
Yes. First question. You can
thought it was for Greg.
So will clubs be buying?
Oh, Jose Ramon, I'll always have an answer, so don't worry about that.
Can you repeat again, Ebru?
Will the clubs be buying less with an aim to balance the books?
Well, I think that
or will they continue to transfer?
Yep. I think that the clubs, my opinion is that all the clubs are open to sell any player, I think. This is the main message that we were getting from all the clubs. All our players are in the market, no? In general. I think that all the clubs cannot allow themselves to refuse any good offer for their players. Of course, forgetting the top 10 clubs, or the clubs that even on these top 10 they are not struggling in terms of cash, no? But in general, I think that the transfer will continue in some top players. I think there are still some big players that can allow to pay some big transfers, but I think that there will be some big discounts whether the clubs need to accept some player transactions at pretty lower cost compared to the book value.
Okay, so Sharazi had a similar question. Let me read Nick's question, which is, what is your view of the concept and probability of a SPAC taking advantage of acquiring a football club or a group of football clubs during this period of downward pressure on the value of clubs? Greg, we know there is so many SPACs being formed and fishing for purchase opportunities.
Well, Goldman Sachs has probably done twice as many SPACs, or led twice as many SPACs as any other firm. You know, we're very, very active in the space. You know, we did the Red Ball SPAC, you know, the one with our recruitment. But what we're seeing in the marketplace is this liquidity, and you have a SPAC, and then the follow-on is a PIPE, public investment in a private company. you're going to see the money. We get a call on a daily basis of what about this, what about that. There's a number of these people out there in the marketplace, so it's going to be a natural evolution, whether they're minority investments or the majority investments, how things are. But hey, where there's trouble, there's money, and there's a lot of money out there. A lot of it has been produced by SPACs. Have to in 2 years buy something, otherwise they collapse, and the promote and all of that disappears. So the question is, will that happen? The answer is yes. It's already happening. Will it continue, at least in the near term, because that's where the big pockets of money are? And SPAC, you're basically backing someone who has expertise in that investment to basically produce money that originally is at a $10 stock price. So the answer is it's going to happen. It's going to happen more because the pain's not over yet. Fans aren't back in the stands. The next 6 months are going to be painful as we get to the start of next year, finish this season in May, see where the TV deals are and stuff. But SPACs are coming. They've already come.
Okay. Jordan, as a club owner, maybe you can take the next one. Theo is asking, I feel people are underestimating how difficult it is to build a multi-club network. Am I wrong? Did you ever consider this strategy?
Yeah, no, I actually just wrote an article for Sports Pro about this. Yes, I think people talk all day, every day, hey, we want to replicate the City Football Group model. And it's so incredibly difficult. It's so capital intensive, logistically difficult. I think there, of course, are different types of multi-club ownership models, right? I personally have a couple minority stakes in several clubs. The investments don't necessarily interact, but I think there's different ways to do it. I think the more sophisticated type investors, and there's a couple of American groups that I know are buying smaller clubs in secondary European markets, Belgium, Holland, Denmark, and using it purely as vehicles to develop and sell players. And I think that makes a lot of sense, especially if you have a little bit of a longer time horizon. But yes, I think there are certain groups, and there are American groups, of which I won't put names on it, who talk a lot about, raising $1 billion to go replicate the City Football Group. And I think that's a pie in the sky for sure.
Can I add?
Yes,
Jordan,
Dan, please.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that question, Jordan, which is the strategy of a team in a second league, or even sometimes in a first league, as a player development center of excellence that essentially generates economic returns from trading is historically anyway, a very, very sound and interesting strategy. My question is, what is the capacity? How many such player development clubs can there be? And the analogy that I think of is, we look at what's going on in baseball in the US, where there's been significant contraction in, I hate to say minor leagues with any reference to European football, but in minor league baseball, which serves primarily as a development mechanism, the sport just determined, and it's been pretty clear for a while, there's just way too much capacity. So, and you're thinking about where to invest, how to invest, also your exit values. Do you have any thoughts on how many player development specialized clubs or groups of clubs there will be in future, and whether we're anywhere near that capacity yet?
Yeah, I don't think we're anywhere near the capacity. I do think it depends on the market. I think if you go into a country like Belgium, for instance, I think we're reaching a point of oversaturation. Well, if we haven't passed it already, a point of oversaturation where everyone's coming in and trying to do the same thing and trying to develop Belgian players, right? I think where there's huge growth potential are emerging markets. I think you look at Mexico, you look at South America, there's a lot of groups going into Uruguay. City Football Group just partnered with that group in Bolivia. Southeast Asia, India, all these markets are totally and incredibly untapped when it comes to just the commercialization of the sport, let alone the development of players. So I think what people
maybe?
Go ahead.
Africa maybe?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you have a handful of people, the guys at Right to Dream, who own a club in Denmark. I think you have a handful of people that are doing player development in Africa really well and sophisticated, but it's like the Wild West in terms of trying to figure out how old the players are. There's obviously very little infrastructure in places like that. So I think what's important that people don't realize is, instead of just buying clubs in countries because it looks sexy, and I think that's what a lot of people are doing in places like Belgium, it's making sure all the puzzle pieces fit together. So it's saying, okay, cool, maybe I'll have a club in the English Premier League that's my, the feature club, right? And then maybe I'll have a club in Belgium that's kind of a second level, and then a club in 3 developing markets, kind of having a pyramid structure so you can seamlessly move the players so that player can go from point A to B to C, and you can get the maximum value when you sell that player. If you're selling that player out of Belgium versus selling them out of a certain another country, it obviously depends on it and it affects the value of that player. Again, you can do whatever you want. It's this, comparing it to minor league baseball, there's no regulation. You can buy 15 clubs in 15 different countries if you want. I saw City Football Group yesterday invested in another club in France. Now they got 2. So like at what point, right? Then now they have 2 in the same market in different divisions. So I'm not exactly sure what their thought process is there.
And Jordan, do you really need to own that EPL club or La Liga club, or can you simply harvest the benefits of that strategy through transfers alone?
You don't need a club in a huge country like that necessarily. I think you do need a club in a big enough country where you can get the maximum value out of your top talent. And maybe that is Belgium or Denmark. I think, to me, if I was putting it together, I'd say, a mid-table team in League One in France, putting aside the media rights situation, Serie A. I think it's important because if you look at selling that player out of the Belgian league versus selling that player from a mid-table club in Serie A, that player's value is going to probably be 5 to 10x higher just for the fact they're proving their worth in the bigger league. So again, I don't think you need to buy a top 6 club in my opinion, but that's just the way I see it.
Let me just say a few things on this because it's a project that is very dear to my heart that we've been working on together with Double Pass, which is the leading talent management and talent development consultant in the world. I think it's not too difficult to identify a group of clubs to buy, but able to integrate them to work together with the same playing philosophy and with the same kind of level of investment in terms of the facilities as well as the kind of trainings. And it takes 7 years, for a talent, to become an elite player, thousands of hours of playing time and a well coordinated strategy. So it's not just piling up and going on a buying spree and buying a bunch of 2nd and 3rd division clubs, but it's 1 out of every 700 youth player actually becomes an elite player, and with a value of on average 500, 600,000. So we're not talking about the Messis or whatever. Therefore, it's critical to have this kind of strategy and support as well in order for the strategy to be successful. David, you're back. Hello.
I am. I'm sorry. I've been coming in and out of the door because of the connection. I think, obviously the bandwidth is starting to creak a little bit, but we have got obviously 3 guests from across the pond, as well as myself, you and Jose Ramon, Ebru. So listen, I think it's been a fascinating discussion. I didn't want to encroach on it because I think actually it was a really lovely, fluid chat, which didn't feel like a strict Q&A, which is what we're after. We're after, really nice, engaging conversation with really good points made. I just want to update on the polls because obviously we've had those going on in the background. So just quickly to update on those, which confederations will see the maximum number of player exchanges in the summer window of 2021? CONMEBOL to UEFA wins that vote with 73%. So if you do see the next Lionel Messi at FC Helsingør, 3/4 of you predicted it. Will more leagues implement salary caps and reduce clubs' lavish spending, aiming to build a more long-term sustainable model? This one's in the balance. Yes, 46%. No, 54%. And that one was moving all the time. So split down the middle. And will it become common for football clubs to start using bitcoins or other forms of cryptocurrency and transfer fees payments? It was actually a larger sort of landslide victory earlier on, but now it's settled at 41% say yes and 59% say no. So maybe a little early, but it surely is something that is building a little bit of momentum and is coming. As I say, I've just really enjoyed the discussion, and we know that you guys, especially in the US, have full days of work ahead, so we won't keep you much longer. I know that you've got other things to be getting on with, but just as a brief sum up, Greg was telling us a little about the debt rules being loosened in the US with waivers, and that could well happen in European football. It will take time to recover from COVID and get on a sound financial footing, but we'll see the trends that Jordan was telling us about there being some safety, then a pop, and then just returning to the trends that Dan was talking about, which is where, especially in media rights valuations, maybe it will grow 5-10% over the next 3 or 4 years, but after that growth could slow, particularly pay TV in established markets. On the thorny issue of the Champions League and whether it will be restructured, the strong are only going to get stronger, says Greg, who was the focal point of the conversation. He was asked by Jordan about clubs taking out high interest loans. And in finance, you have to look at money that is going to show up. And Jordan obviously telling us from a FC Helsingborg perspective about, everything has changed. I mean, COVID has conditioned so many things. Brexit has conditioned a number of things as well. They want to do it differently. They want to do it well. They want to be measured and grow organically. I think that would be accurate to say. And trying to execute that business model where you are in Denmark, but then hopefully moving on to doing it at scale. We talked about SPACs. We talked about multi-club networks. We talked about so many things, and we crammed it into 50 minutes or so. So really appreciate all of your input. Thank you to Ebri for chairing the discussion. Thank you to Jose Ramon, to Greg, to Jordan and Dan. Ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much wraps it up for this edition of WFS Talks. And this webinar has happened thanks to the support of Player Lens. And we got some great insight and detail from Jose Ramon on what they offer. And we look forward to hosting other companies who want to gain visibility and share knowledge in the industry through the WFS platform. If you're interested, we're going to be uploading today's session to the WFS YouTube channel. So you can watch that in the days and weeks to come, and send the links to your friends and colleagues to do so as well. And don't forget to keep across our social channels as well, at World Football Summit on Instagram, at WF Summit on Twitter. In the meantime, thank you again for your attendance and your attention. Do take care, stay safe, and we will see you again for the next edition of WFS Talks. Goodbye.